Hello there, I'm Paul Ray from the official teenwolfwiki, and today I'm talking about the Nogitsune again. Specifically, the timing and the process it had to go through to take over Stiles. Regular viewers might remember this video from several weeks ago.
Monster.
Well, that video did really poorly. Hardly anyone watched it. So I wasn't planning to do a follow-up, but then someone reminded me this week that I had said I would do a Nogitsune timeline thing, and since I don't have another idea burning in my brain, I guess we're gonna do the Nogitsune timeline thing.
With time slipping through my fingers, I knew I was making a terrible decision. But I could not die knowing they would get away. So I called out to our ancestors for Kitsunetsuki, possession by a fox spirit.
We all know how the Nogitsune arrived on our plane of existence. Noshiko called it to possess her so she could take revenge on the U.S. Army for the atrocities at Oak Creek. Now, Nogitsune answered on the first ring, but it chose to take over Reese's body instead. Now, I guess because controlling a corpse is just easier than controlling a powerful celestial kitsune, no matter how willing she claims to be. Anyway, it had complete control of Reese's body from the start and just ran amok. Amok, in this case, left lots and lots of corpses, which led to the big wolf and fox superhero team-up, and Nogitsune ends up in a jar. And that's where it sat for 70 years. Then along comes Jennifer Blake and her earth-shattering storm powers, the jar breaks, and Nogitsune is free once again. So, here you are, a 1,000-year-old trickster spirit with the whole world to choose from. There's a morgue full of corpses nearby if you want to go that route again, but maybe that's how you ended up in the jar in the first place? A dead man just did not provide the level of life energy that you really need in order to secure your place on this plane of existence. So here you are, a Nogitsune lost in the spiritual and literal darkness. And who should cross your path but this hunk of man? Okay, this spindly, angst-ridden kid. But still, Stiles is here, and he has something that only one other person in this collapsing root cellar could offer: a way in. You see, Stiles had just died for a little while. Sort of died. Okay, symbolically died. This whole ice cube baptism opened Stiles, Allison, and Scott to another plane of existence. That opening allowed Nogitsune to slip right into Stiles uninvited. And yes, Nogitsune can control other people without this sort of crack in their soul, but that control is temporary and limited. Stiles' innermost being was open during this period, which is why Nogitsune was able to get such a strong hold right from the start. Of course, Allison and Scott also had openings. Nogitsune couldn't take over Scott because it knows the legend as well as anyone. Void cannot be two things. It cannot be fox and wolf. So Scott was not an option. But why not Allison, a strong, competent, and highly skilled hunter? I don't know for sure, but when I look at my choices as a parasitic spirit form, wanting to hide and gather strength, I would probably go into the least likely suspect. Also, Allison is so strong-willed and stubborn. even when she's 100% wrong. She's so stubborn that Nogitsune might not have been able to manipulate her as easily as it did Stiles. Also, hunters tend to kill themselves instead of becoming supernatural, so that has to be a consideration. Anyway, for whatever reason, Nogitsune chooses Stiles and begins working him in an effort to get control. At this point in the story, it could really only use Stiles' body when he was unconscious or semi out of it. That's why his perceptions were so off for those first few weeks. It was effing with his brain, wiggling in and setting up house.
Okay.
Now, once it was all cozy inside Stiles, it sent out a fly to William Barrow and began growing a tumor in his gut. It then fed on all the chaos caused by Barrow's escape. Chaos both at the school and more intimately among Stiles' close friend group.
4 years younger, I'd punch you.
The electric shock Stiles got at the end, the one that magnetized his bat, was a great big cherry on top of all this. Nogitsune really feasted in this episode and got a big boost to its strength and control. Now, I don't want to give the impression that Stiles was just letting all this happen. Detective Stiles had already started working out that something was up with him way back in Illuminated.
How would I get phosphorus on my kid?
Have you been handling chemicals?
No, I don't think.
He was piecing it all together, but not quickly enough to really take any action.
Are you all right?
This is also when Nogitsune cranked up Stiles' dementia symptoms. Causing him so much pain helped it feed on his fear and angst, and in turn, all the people who loved Stiles, his dad, his friends, they all started feeding the Nogitsune with their worry and concern for Stiles. This is one reason why he is the perfect host. Stiles is beloved, and any threat to his well-being will generate a lot of misery that the monster can feed on.
Melissa?
It's at this point that Nogitsune becomes strong enough to exert more control over Stiles, even when he's awake. This was the period just prior to Riddled, when Nogitsune was setting up the disaster at the hospital and a few other tricks. But it still wasn't in complete control. Stiles would have to agree, and instead, he fought it. He ran off into the woods in an effort to keep Void from hurting people. Unfortunately, the effort to fight actually fed the monster even more, with the entire police force, all his friends and family completely freaked the F out. So, by the time we get to the MRI scene, Stiles is exhausted, and when Nogitsune threatens those closest to him, he knows in his heart that he can't stop it. So he agrees to let it take control. Now, this is the first time it had complete control, and in one night, it does an overly complicated Wile E. Coyote series of tricks and traps.
Lose something? Hey, come!
Jared, it would be very helpful if you could resist throwing up on the potential explosive device.
Get down!
But thanks to Dr. Deaton and the wolf lichen, its control this time was short-lived. The injections put the fox part of Stiles to sleep and gave him enough control to check himself into Eichenhaus. But here again, Nogitsune proved too strong and was able to manipulate the situation to place Malia in danger and force Stiles to let it in again.
Let go, please!
Let me in, Stiles. Let me in. You let me in, I'll let her live.
This is where it finally had complete control. As we saw inside his brain, it was able to keep Stiles distracted and out of the way while it did its dirty work. But at this point, Nogitsune had to know these people weren't going to just let him have Stiles. So he came up with a plan to create a new body, sap Stiles of his life force, take over the Oni, and escape once and for all. It was a good plan.
And I'd have succeeded if it weren't for those meddling kids.
But now the Nogitsune is back in a box, fully contained, and last seen on its way to Paris in the very capable hands of Isaac Leahy.